Have you ever wondered what it takes to build a bridge across waters so treacherous that most people considered it impossible? To span a gap where Pacific storms rage with fury, where currents run deeper than skyscrapers are tall, and where the very earth beneath trembles with the memory of earthquakes. Picture San Francisco in the early 1900s, a jewel of a city perched on golden hills, blessed and cursed by the same waters that made it magnificent, but also made it a prisoner. Visiting friends across the bay meant risking your life on ferryboats that battled waves tall as houses, where fog could strand you for days, where winter storms turned routine crossings into prayers whispered to an unforgiving sea. Good evening, friends, and welcome to the Sleepy Structures. I'm here to guide you on a peaceful journey through the architectural wonders that have shaped our world. Tonight, we'll drift into the beloved story of the Golden Gate Bridge, where impossible dreams became elegant reality suspended between earth and sky. As we begin this tranquil exploration, prepare your space for deep relaxation. Dim your lights to a soft amber glow that whispers of San Francisco's golden sunsets. Settle under your most comfortable blanket, feeling its warmth embrace you like gentle Pacific fog. Let the outside world fade away as we step back through time, leaving behind modern life for the patient rhythm of rivets and cables, dream upon impossible dream. Take a deep breath and feel your body settling into perfect stillness. If this calm journey helps you unwind and find the rest you deserve, you're welcome to like and subscribe. Only if it feels right, only when the moment moves you naturally toward gratitude. The bridge we know today, with its international orange towers reaching toward heaven and cables singing in Pacific wind, stands as proof that humans can touch the impossible. But its story begins with frustration, with dreams that seem too bold to ever become real, and with people who refuse to accept that some things simply cannot be done. Tonight, we'll witness how a city trapped by its own beauty found courage to attempt the impossible. We'll experience the political battles that nearly killed the dream, the engineering puzzles never before solved, and the human cost of building something nature never intended. We'll discover how 11 men lost their lives so millions could cross safely, how storms and earthquakes tested every rivet, and how a structure built to last a century became an eternal symbol of human determination. But our story begins not with triumph, but with isolation, not with celebration, but with daily struggle of people who dreamed of connection across waters, determined to keep them apart. Close your eyes now and let your consciousness drift backward through time, toward morning fog that clings to San Francisco's hills like whispered secrets, where golden dawn reveals a city yearning to connect with the world beyond its beautiful, treacherous waters, where the impossible dream of spanning the Golden Gate is about to begin. Close your eyes and let yourself settle into the morning fog of San Francisco, 1915, where the golden hills rise from a bay that seems to separate dreams from reality. The mist clings to the hillsides like soft cotton, and through its gentle embrace, you can see a city that sparkles like a jewel against the Pacific horizon. You find yourself standing on the steep slopes of Telegraph Hill, looking out over waters that shimmer with morning light. The bay stretches before you, beautiful and treacherous, its surface hiding currents that run deeper than the tallest buildings. This is San Francisco at the dawn of the 20th century, a city blessed with stunning beauty but cursed by isolation. The ferry boats crawl across the water like determined beetles, their smokestacks puffing white clouds into the grey morning air. You watch as one of these brave little vessels fights against waves that seem intent on turning it back toward shore. The journey from San Francisco to Marin County takes nearly an hour on a good day, much longer when Pacific storms turn the bay into a churning cauldron of foam and fury. Have you ever wondered what it feels like when an entire city is trapped by water? You can sense the frustration in the faces of commuters who line the ferry docks each morning, their pocket watches ticking away precious minutes while they wait for boats that may or may not arrive on schedule. The ferry boats became floating traffic jams. Imagine being stuck in traffic on water, with no way to change lanes and nowhere to pull over when engines fail or storms strike. Passengers clutch the railings as vessels pitch and roll through swells that can reach 15 feet during winter storms. You move like morning mist through the crowded ferry terminal, observing businessmen in wool coats checking their watches with growing anxiety. A banker from downtown needs to reach a meeting in Sausalito, but fog has delayed the morning ferry by 2 hours. A family hoping to visit relatives in Marin County discovers that afternoon, crossings have been cancelled due to rough seas. The economic consequences ripple through the city like waves from a dropped stone. Businesses that depend on customers from across the bay struggle during stormy seasons when ferries can't operate safely. Real estate development in Marin County remains limited because potential residents fear being cut off from their livelihoods in San Francisco during bad weather. You witness a scene that plays out daily throughout the winter months. A ferry captain stands at his wheelhouse, studying the whitecaps that dance across the bay like thousands of tiny flags surrendering to the wind. The decision to sail or stay is never simple. Too many risks and passengers complain about delays. Too few precautions and lives are lost to waters that show no mercy to human schedules. The Golden Gate Strait itself seems designed to mock human ambitions. You observe its characteristics with the wonder of someone seeing them for the first time. The opening between San Francisco Bay and the Pacific Ocean spans just over a mile, but that mile contains some of the most challenging water conditions on Earth. Tidal currents rush through the narrow opening at speeds that can exceed 7 knots, fast enough to overwhelm small boats and challenge even the sturdiest ferries. The depth reaches over 300 feet in some places, deeper than the height of most buildings. These aren't gentle rivers that humans have crossed with simple bridges for thousands of years. This is the Pacific Ocean, compressed into a narrow channel that concentrates all its power and fury. But here's something that seems impossible. The very beauty that makes San Francisco so desirable also makes it so isolated. The same dramatic landscape that creates breathtaking views also creates the geographic barriers that trap the city on its peninsula. The mountains of Marin County rise like green walls across the water, so close you feel you could reach out and touch them, yet so far that reaching them requires a dangerous journey across treacherous waters. You move through the city's neighborhoods, observing how isolation shapes daily life in ways both subtle and profound. Children growing up in San Francisco develop different relationships with the world beyond their peninsula. A trip to visit cousins in Oakland becomes an adventure that requires planning, timing, and always a backup plan in case weather forces a change of routes. The fishing industry faces constant challenges as boats must navigate the dangerous Golden Gate Passage to reach the rich Pacific fishing grounds. You watch fishing vessels returning through the gate during afternoon winds, their captains reading water conditions with the skill of people whose lives depend on understanding nature's moods. Some boats wait for hours outside the gate, their crews watching for breaks in the wind patterns that will allow safe passage into the calmer waters of the bay. Others attempt the crossing only to be forced back by conditions too dangerous to navigate. The Golden Gate becomes a gatekeeper that decides who may enter and who must wait. Local newspapers regularly report on ferry accidents and near misses that remind everyone of the risks involved in daily transportation. A ferry breaks down in heavy seas, its passengers spending hours being tossed about while rescue boats fight rough conditions to reach them. Another vessel runs aground on rocky shores when fog reduces visibility to mere feet. These stories create a background of anxiety that affects everyone who depends on ferry transportation. Parents worry when children travel to visit friends across the bay. Business owners lose money when weather prevents customers from reaching their shops. The entire rhythm of life becomes subject to the whims of wind, wave, and weather. You witness the arrival of early automotive pioneers who dream of driving their new motor cars across the bay, only to discover that their vehicles must be loaded onto ferries like cargo. The process is cumbersome and expensive, limiting the appeal of automobile ownership for anyone who needs to travel regularly between San Francisco and the communities across the water. The psychological impact of isolation extends beyond mere inconvenience. You can sense how living on an island, even a large peninsula, affects the collective mindset of San Francisco residents. There's a feeling of being separate from the rest of California, of existing in a beautiful but confined world where the ocean serves as both protection and prison. Real estate developers in Marin County face constant frustration as they try to convince San Francisco residents to purchase homes across the bay. The beautiful rolling hills and mild climate seem perfect for residential development, but the transportation challenges keep many potential buyers away. Why risk the daily ferry commute when you can live closer to work in the city? The first serious discussions about bridging the Golden Gate begin around 1916, but they seem more like fantasy than realistic possibility. Engineers who visit the site return with reports that read like descriptions of an impossible challenge designed by nature to humble human ambition. The wind conditions alone seem designed to prevent bridge construction. You experience these winds as they funnel through the Golden Gate opening, accelerating to speeds that can exceed 60 miles per hour during Pacific storms. These aren't gentle breezes that sway tree branches, but powerful forces that can knock people off their feet and turn construction equipment into dangerous projectiles. But then something magical happens when engineers begin to study the site more carefully. They discover that the same geographic features that make the Golden Gate so challenging also provide some unique advantages for bridge construction. The narrow opening means the span won't need to be impossibly long. The deep water that challenges ferries also means bridge foundations won't need to navigate around shallow obstacles. The bedrock beneath the Golden Gate proves to be solid and stable, capable of supporting enormous structural loads. The mountains on both sides provide natural anchor points for suspension cables. It's as if nature designed the Golden Gate to be bridged, then surrounded it with just enough challenges to make the task seem impossible. Early engineering surveys reveal the true scale of what would be required. Any bridge across the Golden Gate would need to span nearly 9,000 feet from shore to shore, with a main span of over 4,000 feet. These numbers dwarf any existing bridge in the world. The towers would need to rise nearly 750 feet above the water, taller than most skyscrapers. The foundation challenges seem almost supernatural in their difficulty. Bridge supports would need to be built in water over 100 feet deep, subjected to tidal currents strong enough to move massive concrete structures. The engineering has never been attempted on such a scale in such challenging conditions. Earthquake concerns add another layer of seemingly impossible requirements. San Francisco sits near the notorious San Andreas Fault, which demonstrated its destructive power during the Great Earthquake of 1906. Any bridge spanning the Golden Gate would need to survive seismic forces that could shake the Earth itself. Can you imagine trying to design a structure that must be flexible enough to survive earthquakes, yet strong enough to carry the weight of thousands of vehicles? The engineering requirements seem to contradict each other. The bridge must be both yielding and immovable, both delicate and incredibly strong. The US Navy raises additional concerns that seem designed to kill the bridge project before it can begin. Military officials worry that any structure spanning the Golden Gate could interfere with naval operations or provide enemy forces with a strategic target during wartime. The Navy demands that any bridge be built high enough to allow the passage of the largest warships, adding hundreds of feet to the required tower height. Weather patterns in the Golden Gate create their own engineering nightmares. Fog rolls through the opening with such regularity that construction crews would face weeks when visibility drops to just a few feet. Pacific storms bring winds strong enough to halt all construction work, sometimes for days at a time. You observe how these natural forces combine to create conditions that seem specifically designed to prevent human interference. The Golden Gate appears to be nature's way of saying that some barriers are meant to remain in place, that some challenges are too great for human ambition to overcome. Local fishing communities raise their own concerns about how bridge construction might affect marine life and fishing grounds. The Golden Gate serves as a migration route for salmon and other fish species that support both commercial and recreational fishing. Any disruption to these patterns could devastate industries that have operated successfully for generations. The community of engineers who study the Golden Gate site during the 1910s develops a grudging respect for the natural forces they are attempting to overcome. These aren't abstract engineering challenges described in textbooks, but real conditions that have already claimed lives and will continue to demand respect from anyone who ventures into their domain. Yet something about the challenge captures the imagination of visionary engineers who refuse to accept that any problem is truly unsolvable. They begin to see the Golden Gate not as an impossible barrier, but as a puzzle that hasn't yet found its solution. Each challenge becomes an opportunity to develop new techniques and technologies. The economic arguments for bridging the Golden Gate become more compelling as San Francisco's growth becomes increasingly constrained by its geographic isolation. The city's peninsular location limits expansion possibilities, while the communities across the bay offer room for growth but remain difficult to access. You witness business leaders calculating the cost of isolation. Lost opportunities, delayed shipments, missed meetings, and reduced investment from companies that prefer locations with more reliable transportation connections. The ferry system, while romantic and historically significant, simply cannot provide the capacity and reliability that a modern economy demands. Tourism potential also enters the calculations as civic leaders recognize that San Francisco's spectacular natural setting could attract visitors from around the world. But tourists need reliable transportation to explore the region's attractions, and ferry schedules that change with weather conditions don't provide the predictability that tour operators require. The population of Marin County remains artificially low because commuting to San Francisco jobs require such challenging transportation arrangements. Young families consider the beautiful communities across the bay, then choose locations with easier access to employment centers. This demographic pattern limits economic growth on both sides of the bay. As you move through these early discussions and dreams, you begin to understand how the Golden Gate Bridge emerges not from engineering ambition alone, but from the accumulated frustrations of a community that refuses to accept permanent separation from the world beyond their beautiful, isolated peninsula. The ferry captains who battle rough seas daily understand the need for reliable transportation better than anyone. The business owners who lose customers during stormy weather see opportunity in improved connections. The families who worry about emergency access to hospitals and schools across the bay dream of transportation that doesn't depend on weather conditions. And as you witness this impossible challenge that nature has placed between land and land, observing how a magnificent natural barrier becomes both blessing and curse for the people who live in its shadow, you feel yourself moving toward the heated debates where money and politics will clash over this audacious dream, where powerful interests will fight to protect profitable ferry monopolies, while visionary leaders argue for connections that could transform an entire region. Your consciousness moves gently into the heated meeting rooms of San Francisco, where the year is 1923, and the air itself seems thick with tension and tobacco smoke. You float through these spaces like a quiet observer, watching as men in dark suits gesture emphatically at maps and blueprints spread across mahogany tables. The dream of a bridge has awakened something unexpected. Opposition. You drift closer to understand what's happening here. The ferry companies who have carried passengers and cargo across the bay for decades are not pleased with this bridge idea. Their wooden vessels, painted in cheerful colours, have been the lifeline connecting San Francisco to Marin County. Now, suddenly, someone wants to build a structure that could make their entire business obsolete. Your spirit moves like morning mist into the engineering workshops, where brilliant minds gather around drawing tables covered with calculations that could tame the wild waters of the Golden Gate. The year is 1932, and these rooms hum with quiet intensity as men in white shirts and wire-rimmed glasses bend over blueprints that seem to glow under the soft light of desk lamps. You drift closer to observe their work, floating like a curious ghost through spaces filled with the gentle scratch of pencils on paper and the soft rustle of turning pages. Here, the political battles and financial struggles of the previous years have transformed into something entirely different. Pure engineering challenge. The lead engineer, Joseph Strauss, stands before a massive blackboard covered with equations that look like poetry written in numbers. His colleagues gather around him like students around a wise teacher, their faces illuminated by the wonder of attempting something that has never been done before. But as you settle into this peaceful scene, you begin to understand that these engineers face challenges that go far beyond normal bridge building. The Golden Gate Strait is not like other places where bridges have been built. It's wilder, deeper, and more dangerous than anything they've encountered before. Have you ever wondered what makes one body of water more challenging than another? The Golden Gate Strait presents a combination of difficulties that would be daunting even if they appeared separately. But here, nature has gathered all her most formidable obstacles into one narrow passage between the hills. The water here is not shallow and calm like a peaceful river. Instead, it plunges to depths of over 90 feet in some places. Imagine trying to build the foundation of a house, but instead of digging a few feet into solid ground, you must somehow create a foundation 9 stories down, underwater, in complete darkness. The engineers spread out charts that show the bay's underwater landscape. Their fingers trace the contours of the sea floor like explorers mapping unknown territory. They discover that the bottom of the Golden Gate is not smooth sand or solid rock, but a complex mixture of materials that changes from place to place. In some areas, the seafloor consists of soft mud that would never support the weight of a massive bridge tower. In other spots, they find rock so hard that cutting through it would require explosives powerful enough to shake the entire bay. The underwater terrain is like a puzzle where every piece presents a different engineering challenge. But the depth and the sea floor are only the beginning of their troubles. The Golden Gate Strait also experiences some of the strongest tidal currents on the Pacific coast. Twice each day, billions of gallons of water rush through this narrow opening as the ocean tide rises and falls. Picture trying to work underwater while standing in a river that flows at 7 miles per hour. That's faster than most people can walk on dry land. These currents are so powerful that they can push a grown man off his feet, toss construction equipment around like toys, and make precise underwater work nearly impossible. The engineers gather around scale models of the strait, using coloured water to simulate how these currents behave. They watch as the miniature tides rush back and forth, creating whirlpools and eddies that dance like liquid ballerinas. But what looks graceful in their models represents chaos and danger for anyone trying to build a bridge foundation in the real Golden Gate. Your consciousness drifts through their calculations as they attempt to solve the current problem. They must find a way to work underwater in conditions that change every 6 hours. When the tide rushes in from the ocean, the current flows one direction. When it rushes back out, everything reverses. It's like trying to build something while standing on a floor that constantly tilts back and forth. The engineers realize that conventional underwater construction methods will not work in the Golden Gate. Techniques that succeed in calmer waters fail completely when confronted with these powerful currents. They must invent entirely new approaches, create tools that have never existed, and develop methods that can work in conditions no bridge builder has ever faced. But then something magical happened that might make you smile in your drowsy state. The very challenges that seem insurmountable begin to inspire innovations that will revolutionize bridge building forever. The need to work in deep, fast-moving water leads to the development of underwater construction techniques so advanced that they will be copied by engineers around the world for decades to come. Like inventors who create better mousetraps when faced with particularly clever mice, these engineers begin designing solutions that are more elegant than anything attempted before. One of their first breakthroughs involves creating a new type of underwater work environment. Instead of trying to fight the currents, they decide to build temporary structures that can work with the water's natural movements. They design massive caissons, underwater work chambers that can be lowered to the seafloor like diving bells. Can you imagine working inside a giant metal box under 90 feet of water? These caissons must be strong enough to resist the crushing pressure of all that water above, yet large enough for workers to move around inside. They must have systems for pumping out water, bringing in fresh air, and allowing workers to enter and exit safely. The design of these caissons requires solving problems that have never been solved before. How do you create an airtight seal at the bottom of a metal chamber that's pressing against an uneven seafloor? How do you pump out water while preventing the chamber from floating back to the surface like a cork? How do you supply air to workers who are essentially trapped in a metal box under nearly 100 feet of water? Your spirit moves through their design sessions like a gentle breeze, observing how each solution creates new problems that require additional solutions. The engineers develop elaborate systems of air pumps, water pumps, pressure valves, and emergency systems. Their drawings begin to look like the blueprints for submarines rather than bridge foundations. But even as they solve the technical challenges of underwater construction, they discover that their calculations for the bridge's cables contain fundamental errors. The mathematics they inherited from previous bridge projects assumes conditions that simply don't exist at the Golden Gate. Traditional suspension bridge calculations work perfectly for bridges built in protected harbours or across calm rivers. But the Golden Gate Strait presents forces that these equations never anticipated. The constant wind, the earthquake potential, the temperature changes between ocean and bay. All of these factors interact in ways that make standard bridge engineering inadequate. The engineers find themselves in the peculiar position of having to invent new mathematics just to figure out whether their bridge will stay standing. Like explorers who must draw maps of territories that appear on no existing charts, they begin developing calculation methods that account for the unique conditions of the Golden Gate. Their blackboards fill with equations that look like abstract art. They calculate wind loads, earthquake stresses, temperature expansion, cable tensions, and foundation pressures using mathematical approaches that have never been tested in the real world. Each equation represents hours of careful thinking about forces and stresses that previous bridge builders never had to consider. Do you notice how solving one problem often reveals 3 more problems hiding underneath? The engineers discover that creating stronger underwater foundations requires heavier concrete, which increases the load on the seafloor, which requires even stronger foundations. It's like trying to solve a puzzle where every piece you place correctly shows you additional pieces you didn't know were missing. As they work through these challenges, Their foundation designs go through revision after revision. Early plans call for solid concrete bases poured directly onto the sea floor. But testing reveals that such foundations would crack under earthquake stresses. The concrete would be strong enough to support the bridge under normal conditions, but California's earthquakes require foundations that can flex and move without breaking. The engineers develop innovative foundation designs that combine flexibility with strength. Instead of solid concrete blocks, they create foundations with internal structures that can absorb earthquake motion without failing. These new designs look almost organic, like the root systems of enormous trees that can bend in storms without breaking. But their breakthrough foundation designs create yet another challenge: how to build such complex structures underwater in fast-moving currents using construction methods that don't exist yet. The gap between what they can design on paper and what they can actually build in the Golden Gate grows wider with each innovation. Your consciousness drifts through their workshops as they begin developing construction equipment specifically for the Golden Gate project. They cannot buy the tools they need because such tools have never been built before. Like medieval craftsmen who made their own hammers before they could make horseshoes, these engineers must invent their construction methods before they can construct their bridge. They design specialized barges that can maintain precise positions despite the powerful currents. These vessels must be stable enough to serve as platforms for heavy construction equipment, yet maneuverable enough to work in the confined space of the Golden Gate Strait. The barges themselves become engineering projects as complex as small ships. The engineers also develop new types of diving equipment for workers who must inspect and guide the underwater construction. Standard diving suits of the 1930s are adequate for calm, shallow water work, but the Golden Gate requires diving gear that can function in deep, turbulent water while allowing precise manual work. But then something unexpected happened that forced them to reconsider everything they had designed so far. During testing of their foundation concepts, one of their construction barges encountered a sudden storm and sank in the bay. The loss of the barge was more than just an equipment failure. It was a stark reminder that the Golden Gate Strait can destroy even well-designed vessels when conditions turn dangerous. If a construction barge could sink during testing, what might happen to workers trying to build foundations in the middle of the strait? The barge sinking leads to the project's first fatalities, as 2 workers are lost in the accident. These deaths cast a shadow over the engineering workshops like storm clouds blocking the sun. The men who had been focused purely on technical challenges suddenly confront the reality that their design decisions will determine whether workers live or die. Can you imagine the weight of responsibility these engineers must feel? Every calculation they make, every design decision they approve, every construction method they develop will directly affect the safety of the workers who must implement their plans. The bridge is no longer just an abstract engineering challenge. It has become a matter of life and death. The tragedy forces the engineers to add an entirely new dimension to their work: comprehensive safety planning. They must design not only a bridge that will stand for decades, but also construction methods that will protect workers during the dangerous building process. This leads to another breakthrough that will influence construction projects worldwide. The engineers begin developing safety innovations that go far beyond the minimal requirements of 1930s construction work. They design safety nets, protective platforms, emergency rescue systems, and worker protection equipment that represents a revolution in construction safety practices. One of their most important innovations is a massive safety net suspended beneath the bridge construction area. This net, which will eventually cost over $100,000, is designed to catch any worker who falls during construction. It's an enormous investment in worker safety that many people consider extravagant, but the engineers insist that protecting human life is worth any cost. The safety net requires its own engineering analysis. It must be strong enough to catch a falling worker without breaking, flexible enough to absorb the impact without injuring the person it saves, and positioned carefully to provide maximum protection without interfering with construction work. The net becomes almost like a secondary bridge suspended beneath the main bridge. Your spirit moves through their safety planning sessions, observing how the engineers balance protection with practicality. Too much safety equipment might make construction impossible. Too little might cost lives. They must find solutions that protect workers while still allowing the bridge to be built. As they develop these safety innovations, the engineers also begin working with new materials that have never been used in bridge construction before. The extreme conditions of the Golden Gate require steel alloys with properties that standard bridge steel cannot provide. They work with metallurgists to develop steel cables that can withstand the constant wind and salt spray of the Golden Gate environment. These cables must be stronger than any previously manufactured, yet flexible enough to handle the bridge's movement during earthquakes and storms. The development of these new steel alloys becomes a project within the project. The engineers must specify exact chemical compositions, heat treatment processes, and quality control methods that will ensure every cable meets their unprecedented strength requirements. They're essentially creating new materials while simultaneously designing the bridge that will use them. But perhaps the most amusing challenge they face is also one of the most practical. The Golden Gate's constant fog creates visibility problems that make precise construction work nearly impossible during certain weather conditions. Have you ever tried to thread a needle while wearing sunglasses in a dark room? Working in Golden Gate fog can be similarly challenging. Workers cannot see clearly enough to perform delicate tasks. Equipment operators cannot judge distances accurately. Safety supervisors cannot monitor work effectively when they cannot see what workers are doing. The engineers must develop work schedules and procedures that account for fog conditions. They create detailed weather monitoring systems that can predict when fog will lift and when it will thicken. They design lighting systems powerful enough to penetrate fog without creating glare that might blind workers. The fog problem leads to innovations in construction scheduling that coordinate work activities with natural weather patterns. Instead of working fixed hours regardless of conditions, construction crews will follow schedules that maximize productivity during clear weather while ensuring safety during foggy periods. As your consciousness moves through these engineering workshops in the mid-1930s, you can sense how the various technical challenges are beginning to coalesce into comprehensive solutions. The underwater construction methods, the new foundation designs, the advanced materials, the revolutionary safety systems, all of these innovations are starting to work together like instruments in an orchestra. The engineers have moved far beyond simply building a bridge. They have created an entire system of construction techniques, safety procedures, and material specifications that will influence engineering projects for generations to come. The Golden Gate Bridge is becoming a laboratory for testing ideas that will reshape how large construction projects are approached. Do you notice how solving difficult problems often produces solutions that are more elegant than anyone initially imagined? The engineers' response to the Golden Gate's challenges has resulted in design innovations that are not only functional but also beautiful. Their safety nets will become works of art. Their foundation designs will be studied by engineers worldwide. Their construction methods will set new standards for the entire industry. But as these elegant solutions take shape on paper, creating detailed blueprints and specification documents that stack like small mountains on their drafting tables, the engineers know that their greatest test still lies ahead. All of their calculations, innovations, and safety plans must now be proven in the real world. The transition from engineering theory to actual construction represents a leap of faith that requires enormous courage. The engineers have solved problems that have never been solved before, but they cannot be absolutely certain that their solutions will work until they try to build the bridge in the actual conditions of the Golden Gate Strait. Your awareness begins to shift away from the quiet workshops filled with drawings and calculations. The gentle sound of pencils on paper fades as you prepare to enter a world of heavy machinery, dangerous weather, and physical labor that will test every assumption the engineers have made. As these elegant solutions take shape on paper, you feel yourself drawn toward the construction sites where human hands will transform dreams into dangerous reality. Can you imagine owning a fleet of ferries and hearing that someone wants to build a bridge right where your boats travel every day? It would be like owning the only staircase in a tall building and learning that someone wants to install an elevator. The ferry company executives lean forward in their leather chairs, their voices rising as they discuss lawsuits. Legal papers rustle like autumn leaves. They argue that a bridge would be dangerous for navigation, that ships might collide with its towers in the fog. But you sense something else beneath their words. Fear. The fear of change, of losing control, of watching their profits sail away like ships disappearing into the mist. You float away from these tense meetings and find yourself in another kind of gathering entirely. Here, in rooms filled with people who call themselves conservationists, a different kind of opposition is brewing. These individuals love the bay exactly as it is. They speak passionately about preserving the natural beauty of the Golden Gate Strait. Picture the Golden Gate as it exists now in your peaceful dream state. The water flows freely between the hills, unmarked by human construction. Seabirds dive and soar without having to navigate around massive concrete towers. The conservationists worry that a bridge will scar this pristine landscape forever. Their concerns are gentle but firm, like a parent protecting a sleeping child. They ask important questions. What will happen to the fish when construction begins? How will the bridge affect the fog patterns that make San Francisco so mysteriously beautiful? Will future generations forgive them for changing this natural wonder? You drift through their meetings like morning mist, observing how they organize letter-writing campaigns and petition drives. Their passion is real, their love for the bay genuine. Yet you also sense their underlying fear that progress always means destruction, that building something new requires destroying something old. As your dream consciousness moves through time, you encounter yet another source of opposition. The United States military has been studying the Golden Gate Strait for decades. To them, this narrow passage represents something entirely different from what civilians see. The military officers, in their crisp uniforms, spread out charts that show the strategic importance of San Francisco Bay. During the Great War, which ended just a few years ago, they watched this entrance carefully. Enemy submarines could potentially slip through the Golden Gate. A bridge, they argue, might interfere with their ability to defend the harbour. But here's where the story takes an amusing twist that might make you smile in your drowsy state. The military doesn't just worry about enemy ships, they're also concerned about their own vessels. The Navy's largest ships need to pass under any bridge that spans the Golden Gate. How high would such a bridge need to be? High enough that their battleships won't scrape their masts against it like a tall person, bumping their head on a low doorway. The officers calculate and recalculate. They measure the height of their tallest ship's masts and add safety margins. They consider fog conditions that might make navigation difficult. They debate whether a bridge might actually help defense by making it harder for enemy vessels to enter the bay. Their meetings stretch late into the night, fueled by coffee and concern for national security. You observe how each group's opposition stems from their own perspective, their own fears, their own vision of what the Golden Gate should remain. The ferry companies see profit and tradition. The conservationists see natural beauty. The military sees strategic necessity. None of them see exactly what the others see. As time moves forward in your gentle dream, you witness these various opposition groups beginning to organize more formally. They hire lawyers, fund studies, and lobby politicians. The ferry companies commission reports about navigation hazards. The conservationists gather signatures from citizens who love the bay's current appearance. The military presents detailed analyses of security concerns. Do you notice how opposition often makes an idea stronger, not weaker? Like a muscle that grows stronger when exercised against resistance, the bridge proposal begins to develop more detailed responses to each concern raised against it. The bridge supporters, led by a determined engineer named Joseph Strauss, find themselves forced to become better planners because of this opposition. They must address every concern, answer every question, solve every problem that the opposition identifies. In a way, their opponents become unwitting collaborators in creating a more thoughtful, more carefully planned project. Your consciousness drifts forward through the years, and suddenly the political landscape shifts dramatically. The year is 1929, and something happens that changes everything. The stock market, that great engine of American prosperity, crashes like a wave against rocky cliffs. In your dream state, you can almost hear the sound of that crash reverberating through San Francisco's financial district. Banks close their heavy doors. Businesses fail like dominoes falling in sequence. Men who are wealthy on Tuesday find themselves poor by Friday. The entire economic foundation of the country trembles. Now, imagine trying to convince people to spend millions of dollars on building a bridge when they're worried about having enough money for food and shelter. The bridge project, which already faced opposition from ferry companies, conservationists, and the military, now confronts an even more formidable enemy: economic reality. The stock market crash doesn't just affect rich investors. It touches everyone. The ferry workers worry about losing their jobs. The conservationists find fewer people interested in environmental concerns when those people are struggling to survive economically. Even the military faces budget cuts that make their opposition less influential. But here's where the story takes another gentle twist that might surprise your drowsy mind. Sometimes disasters create opportunities that didn't exist before. The economic crash makes people desperate for work, any work. Building a bridge would provide jobs for thousands of unemployed workers. Suddenly, some of the opposition begins to soften. You float through the changed atmosphere of San Francisco in the early 1930s. The city feels different now. Street corners that once bustled with prosperous pedestrians now host bread lines. Elegant restaurants serve fewer customers. The ferry boats still run, but they carry passengers who count every penny of the fare. In this new economic climate, the bridge project's supporters discover an unexpected ally: desperation. People who might have opposed the bridge in prosperous times now see it as a source of employment. The same ferry workers who feared losing their jobs to a bridge begin to realize that building the bridge would provide work for years. The conservationists find their movement weakened not because their concerns are less valid, but because environmental protection seems like a luxury when families are hungry. Their meetings grow smaller, their influence diminished by the pressing needs of economic survival. Even the military's opposition becomes less decisive. Budget cuts force them to choose their battles more carefully. Defending the Golden Gate remains important, but spending money to fight a bridge project that might stimulate the local economy becomes harder to justify. As your dream consciousness moves through this period, you witness the creation of something entirely new: the Golden Gate Bridge and Highway District. This organization represents a fascinating solution to the political and financial challenges that have emerged. The Bridge District operates like a government, but not quite like a government. It has the power to collect taxes, sell bonds, and condemn property for public use. But it exists specifically and only to build and operate a bridge. It's as if the community created a special purpose entity whose sole reason for existence is making this dream become reality. Can you imagine the complexity of creating such an organization? Like building a new type of machine for a task that has never been attempted before, the bridge district must be designed from scratch. What powers should it have? How should it be governed? Who should oversee its decisions? The legal documents creating the bridge district stack up like layers of a complex cake. Each page addresses another concern raised by the opposition groups. Ferry company concerns about navigation lead to provisions requiring Coast Guard approval. Environmental concerns result in requirements for minimizing construction impact. Military concerns create obligations to ensure adequate clearance for naval vessels. You observe how the bridge district becomes a kind of peace treaty between the opposing forces. Instead of defeating the opposition, the bridge supporters absorb their concerns and make them part of the project itself. The ferry companies are promised that the bridge will complement rather than eliminate ferry service for certain routes. The conservationists are assured that the bridge design will be beautiful and harmonious with the natural setting. The military receives guarantees about clearance heights and security considerations, but creating the bridge district solves only the political problems. The financial challenges prove even more daunting. The cost estimates for the bridge keep growing as engineers realize the full complexity of the task ahead. Early estimates of $20 million rise to $30 million, then $35 million. In your peaceful dream state, you can almost see these numbers floating like clouds above the bay. $35 million in 1930 represents an enormous sum. To put it in perspective, many working families earn less than $2,000 per year. The bridge would cost more than the annual wages of 17,000 families. Where will such money come from? Banks, already struggling from the economic crash, are reluctant to lend money for such an unprecedented project. Private investors, their fortunes diminished by the stock market collapse, have little appetite for risky ventures. The federal government, dealing with national economic crisis, cannot provide funding for local projects. The bridge district finds itself in a peculiar situation. It has the legal authority to build a bridge, the political support to proceed, and detailed plans for construction. But it lacks the single most essential element: money. Do you ever notice how problems sometimes create their own solutions? The bridge district's financial crisis forces its leaders to become creative in ways they might never have considered during prosperous times. They develop innovative financing approaches that will influence public projects for decades to come. The solution they devise involves selling bonds directly to ordinary citizens. Instead of borrowing money from banks or wealthy investors, the bridge district asks regular people to loan money to the project. A school teacher might buy a $100 bond. A shopkeeper might purchase $500 worth. Thousands of small loans would add up to the millions needed for construction. This approach has a wonderful side effect that the bridge district's leaders might not have fully anticipated. When ordinary citizens own bonds in the bridge project, they become personally invested in its success. Instead of seeing the bridge as something imposed on them by distant authorities, they begin to see it as their bridge, a project they literally own a piece of. Your consciousness drifts through the communities around San Francisco Bay as this bond campaign unfolds. You witness families discussing whether to invest their savings in bridge bonds. Some see it as a patriotic duty, supporting a project that will benefit their region for generations. Others view it as a practical investment that will pay interest while contributing to local economic recovery. The bond campaign becomes a kind of grassroots movement. Local newspapers publish articles explaining how the bonds work. Community organizations host meetings where bridge district officials answer questions. Church groups and social clubs debate the merits of investing in the project. But even as the bond campaign shows promise, the bridge district faces another challenge that tests its resolve. The year 1931 arrives with the economic depression deepening rather than improving. Banks continue to fail. Unemployment continues to rise. The very citizens who are being asked to buy bridge bonds are struggling to pay for basic necessities. The bridge district finds itself caught in a cruel irony. The economic conditions that make the bridge necessary as a job-creating project are the same conditions that make it difficult to finance. People want the jobs that bridge construction would provide, but they lack the money to buy the bonds that would fund those jobs. In your dream state, you can sense the weight of these contradictions pressing down on the bridge district's leaders like fog settling over the bay. They have overcome political opposition, created a legal framework for the project, and developed innovative financing plans. Yet the economic reality of the Great Depression threatens to stop everything before construction can begin. Some board members begin to waver. Perhaps this isn't the right time for such an ambitious project. Perhaps they should wait for economic conditions to improve. Perhaps the opposition groups were right to question whether a bridge is really necessary. But here's where the story reveals another gentle twist. Sometimes the darkest moments contain the seeds of breakthrough. The bridge district's financial crisis forces them to seek help from an unexpected source, the Bank of America. The Bank of America, led by a visionary named A.P. Giannini, has survived the economic crash better than many financial institutions. More importantly, Giannini believes in California's future growth and sees the Golden Gate Bridge as an investment in that future. He agrees to purchase the entire first bond issue, providing the initial funding needed to begin the project. Can you imagine the relief in that boardroom when this news arrives? Like sunshine breaking through storm clouds, the Bank of America's commitment transforms the entire atmosphere around the bridge project. Suddenly, what seemed impossible becomes merely difficult. The bank's involvement does more than provide money. It sends a signal to other potential investors that serious financial professionals consider the bridge project viable. This vote of confidence helps the bridge district raise additional funds and maintain momentum despite continuing economic challenges. As your consciousness moves through this period, you observe how the various opposition groups react to these developments. The ferry companies, seeing that the bridge project has secured serious financial backing, begin to shift their strategy from outright opposition to negotiating for favourable terms. They recognize that fighting an inevitability wastes resources that could be used to adapt to changing circumstances. The conservationists, still concerned about environmental impact, begin working with bridge district officials to minimize harm rather than prevent construction entirely. They advocate for specific design features that will make the bridge more harmonious with its natural setting. Even the military adjusts its position. Instead of opposing the bridge, military officials begin working with designers to ensure that the structure meets naval clearance requirements while serving defense needs in other ways. You notice how opposition often evolves rather than simply disappears. The groups that once fought against the bridge concept now focus on influencing how the bridge will be built, rather than whether it will be built. This shift from prevention to participation marks a crucial turning point in the project's development. The political and financial battles of the late 1920s and early 1930s have transformed the Golden Gate Bridge from a simple engineering challenge into something much more complex and interesting. The bridge must now satisfy not only the basic requirement of spanning the Golden Gate, but also the diverse concerns of ferry companies, conservationists, military officials, bondholders, and taxpayers. In your peaceful dream state, you can sense how these various pressures and requirements are shaping the bridge's design in ways that its original proponents never anticipated. The structure that will eventually rise from these political and financial struggles will be stronger, more beautiful, and more thoughtfully planned because of the opposition it has faced. Do you notice how conflict often leads to better solutions? Like a river that becomes more interesting as it flows around obstacles, the bridge project has become more sophisticated and comprehensive because of the challenges it has encountered. As this chapter of the bridge's story draws to a close, you can feel your consciousness beginning to shift toward new kinds of challenges. The political opposition has been addressed through compromise and collaboration. The financial obstacles have been overcome through innovation and persistence. The major legal and administrative frameworks have been established. But now, as the project moves from dreams and politics into the realm of practical reality, an entirely different set of challenges emerges. These are not political or financial challenges, but technical and engineering puzzles that have never been solved before. Your gentle awareness begins to drift away from the boardrooms and meeting halls where men in suits have wrestled with questions of money and authority. You move toward the engineering workshops where brilliant minds will attempt to solve puzzles that have never been solved before. Your consciousness moves with gentle reverence among the construction workers as they begin the most dangerous dance ever attempted, building a bridge while dancing with death above the cold Pacific waters. The year is 1933, and the morning fog lifts to reveal men in hard hats and work clothes preparing to risk their lives for a dream made of steel and stone. You float among them like a protective spirit, watching as they gather at the construction sites that have sprouted along both shores of the Golden Gate. These workers come from many backgrounds. Some are experienced iron workers who have built skyscrapers in distant cities. Others are local men desperate for steady work during the Depression years. Each morning, they look up at the towers that will eventually rise 250 feet above the water, then out at the churning strait where currents run swift and cold. The Pacific Ocean here maintains a temperature that can steal life from a human body in minutes. Even on warm days, the water remains so cold that survival time is measured in heartbeats rather than hours. What would it feel like to work above waters so cold and deep, knowing that a single mistake could send you plunging into an ocean that shows no mercy to those who fall? The workers face this reality every day as they climb scaffolding that sways in the wind, carry heavy tools across narrow beams, and perform precise tasks while fighting gusts that can knock a strong man off balance. The construction begins with the foundation work that the engineers designed so carefully in their workshops. But translating those elegant plans into reality proves more challenging and dangerous than anyone anticipated. The underwater caissons must be positioned with absolute precision, while massive construction barges fight against currents that constantly try to push them off course. Your spirit drifts down to observe the divers who descend into the dark waters to guide the foundation work. These brave men wear heavy diving suits that make them move like underwater astronauts. They communicate with the surface through telephone lines that crackle with static, reporting on conditions in a world where sunlight never penetrates. The divers work in shifts because the cold water and physical demands exhaust them quickly. They guide massive concrete pours, inspect underwater connections, and solve problems that cannot be seen from the surface. Each time they descend, they enter an environment where equipment failure or accident could trap them forever beneath the waves. But even as the underwater work proceeds, the most visible and dangerous phase of construction begins above the water. The bridge towers start to rise like steel mountains, growing taller each day as crews of iron workers climb higher and higher above the strait. These iron workers perform a kind of aerial ballet that takes your breath away even in your peaceful dream state. They walk across narrow steel beams with the casual confidence of cats on fence posts. But beneath them lies not a garden, but 200 feet of empty air, and then the unforgiving Pacific. The wind at this height behaves differently than it does at ground level. It comes in sudden gusts that can reach 70 miles per hour without warning. Workers learn to feel these gusts approaching. A subtle change in air pressure, a different sound in the steel cables, a shift in the tower's almost imperceptible swaying. Can you imagine trying to perform precise work while standing on a narrow beam that moves slightly in the wind? The iron workers must heat rivets to exact temperatures, position heavy steel plates with millimeter accuracy, and operate tools that require steady hands, all while the wind tries to push them off their perches like leaves in a storm. The safety equipment available to these workers seems primitive by later standards. Their hard hats are simple metal bowls that provide minimal protection. Their safety lines are basic ropes that might catch a falling worker or might break under the sudden shock of a fall. They wear regular work clothes that offer no protection from wind, cold, or the sharp edges of construction materials. Despite these limitations, the work progresses with remarkable speed. The towers grow taller each week, their steel frameworks reaching toward each other across the Golden Gate like the arms of giant friends preparing to embrace. But this progress comes at a terrible cost that weighs heavily on everyone involved in the project. The first death occurs early in the construction process, when a worker falls from the scaffolding during foundation work. The accident happens so quickly that nearby workers barely have time to shout a warning before their colleague disappears into the cold water below. Rescue boats race to the scene, but the combination of impact and hypothermia proves fatal. Your consciousness moves gently through the somber mood that settles over the construction site after this tragedy. The other workers continue their jobs because they need the wages, but everyone works more carefully, more aware of the dangers that surround them every moment of every day. The death affects not just the construction crews, but also the families who depend on these dangerous jobs for survival. In nearby neighborhoods, wives kiss their husbands goodbye each morning, not knowing if they will return home that evening. Children learn to listen for their father's footsteps on the front porch, the sound that means another day has passed safely. But something beautiful emerged from this tragedy that might bring you comfort in your dreamy state. The workers themselves begin developing additional safety practices that go beyond the formal requirements. They create informal buddy systems where partners watch out for each other. They develop hand signals for communicating in the wind when voices cannot be heard. They share techniques for maintaining balance and grip in dangerous conditions. These worker-initiated safety improvements represent a kind of collective wisdom that emerges when people face shared dangers. The men working on the bridge begin to function almost like a family, protecting each other because they understand that their survival depends on mutual care and attention. As the towers continue to rise, the installation of the massive safety net begins. This net, designed by the engineers to catch falling workers, stretches beneath the bridge construction area like an enormous spiderweb made of rope and steel cable. The net represents an investment in worker safety that is unprecedented in construction projects of this era. The installation of the safety net itself requires dangerous work, as crews must position and secure it while working at great heights above the water. But once in place, the net transforms the psychological atmosphere of the entire project. Workers still face serious dangers, but they no longer face certain death if they slip or fall. The safety net proves its value almost immediately. Within weeks of its installation, it catches its first falling worker, a man who loses his footing on a wet steel beam and plunges toward the water below. Instead of falling to his death, he lands in the net, shaken but alive. The other workers cheer from their positions on the towers, celebrating a life saved by foresight and engineering. More workers follow, men who slip on icy morning scaffolding, who are struck by wind-blown tools, who lose their grip during particularly challenging tasks. Each time, the net catches them like a giant's gentle hand. These survivors begin calling themselves members of the Halfway to Hell Club, a name that sounds like adventure, but represents the serious reality of construction work above the Golden Gate. The safety net that saved lives became known by a name that sounded like adventure, the Halfway to Hell Club, but each member understood how close they had come to leaving their families forever. The club becomes a source of both pride and sobering awareness among the construction crews, but even with the safety net in place, the work remains extraordinarily dangerous. The net can catch workers who fall, but it cannot protect against all the hazards of high-altitude construction. Flying debris, equipment failures, and extreme weather conditions continue to threaten the crews daily. Do you notice how some dangers cannot be eliminated, only managed? The workers develop an almost philosophical acceptance of risk that allows them to function effectively despite constant peril. They focus intensely on their immediate tasks while maintaining awareness of their surroundings, a kind of focused alertness that becomes second nature. As construction progresses through 1934 and 1935, the bridge begins to take its recognizable shape. The towers reach their full height. The cables are strung between them like harp strings, and the roadway begins to extend from both shores. But this progress requires increasingly complex and dangerous work as crews install the suspension cables and build the roadway deck. The cable installation presents unique challenges that test both engineering solutions and worker courage. Each cable consists of thousands of individual wires that must be spun in place using a technique that requires workers to ride back and forth across the strait on small platforms suspended from the cables. These cable-spinning crews work in conditions that seem to defy common sense. They ride platforms no larger than small rooms, suspended by cables over 200 feet above the water, while wind gusts rock their perches like boats in a storm. They must maintain perfect concentration while handling delicate wire-spinning equipment in conditions that would challenge experienced sailors. The cable work continues through all weather conditions except the most severe storms. Workers spin cables during fog so thick they cannot see their own hands, during winds so strong they must hold on to avoid being blown off their platforms, and during rain that makes every surface slippery and treacherous. Your consciousness follows these brave men as they perform their aerial dance day after day, month after month. Their skill and courage seem almost superhuman as they adapt to working in an environment where humans were never meant to spend extended time. They develop techniques for maintaining balance in high winds, for keeping their tools secure in gusting conditions, and for recognizing when weather becomes too dangerous to continue. But as the cable work nears completion and roadway construction begins, the project faces a crisis that threatens everything they have accomplished. Labour disputes arise as workers demand better safety conditions and higher wages to compensate for the extraordinary risks they face. The workers' concerns are entirely reasonable given the dangers they confront daily. They request additional safety equipment, more frequent safety inspections, and wages that reflect the specialized skills required for high-altitude construction work. But negotiations become complicated by the economic pressures of the Depression and the tight budgets that govern the project. The labour disputes lead to work stoppages that delay construction and increase costs. But more importantly, they highlight the human cost of building the bridge, not just in terms of wages and working conditions, but in terms of the physical and emotional toll on the workers and their families. During these tense negotiations, you observe how the bridge project affects the broader community around the Golden Gate. Local fishing communities complain that construction activities disrupt their traditional fishing grounds. Ferry operators worry about competition from the future bridge. Residents of nearby neighborhoods deal with noise, dust, and heavy equipment traffic. The fishing community protests are particularly poignant because these families have worked the waters of the Golden Gate for generations. They know every current, every seasonal change, every hidden danger in these waters. The construction of the bridge represents not just progress to them, but the end of a way of life that has sustained their families for decades. But even as these various conflicts play out, the bridge continues to grow. The roadway extends further from both shores with each passing week. The structure begins to look less like a construction project and more like the bridge that will soon carry traffic between San Francisco and Marin County. Then, on February 17, 1937, tragedy strikes with devastating suddenness. A section of scaffolding breaks free from the nearly completed bridge and falls into the safety net with such force that the net itself tears and collapses. 10 workers riding the falling scaffolding plunge through the torn net into the cold Pacific waters below. The accident happens so quickly that rescue efforts, despite being launched immediately, can save only one of the fallen workers. 9 men lose their lives in a single moment, their families receiving news that transforms ordinary Wednesday into the worst day of their lives. 2 more workers die from injuries sustained in the accident, bringing the total death toll to 11. What must it feel like for the families who lose fathers, husbands, sons in this terrible accident? Your gentle consciousness moves through the grief-stricken neighborhoods where these families live, observing how entire communities rally to support the widows and children left behind. The February 17th accident casts a shadow over the nearly completed bridge that affects everyone involved in the project. The workers who survive feel guilt mixed with relief. The engineers question whether their safety innovations were adequate. The project managers face criticism about worker protection and construction practices. But something remarkable happens in the aftermath of this tragedy that might comfort your peaceful spirit. The families of the lost workers, despite their grief, do not call for the bridge project to be abandoned. Instead, they ask that their husbands' and fathers' sacrifice be honoured by completing the bridge safely and making it a monument to the courage of all who worked on it. The community response to the tragedy reveals the deep connection that has developed between the bridge and the people who live around the Golden Gate. The bridge is no longer just a construction project. It has become a symbol of human determination, courage, and the willingness to risk everything for a dream that will benefit future generations. The surviving workers return to complete the final tasks with renewed dedication to safety and craftsmanship. They work more carefully, more aware of the dangers, but also more determined to finish what their lost colleagues died building. The bridge becomes not just a crossing over the Golden Gate, but a memorial to the 11 men who gave their lives for its construction. As construction nears completion in early 1937, the bridge reveals itself in its full, magnificent beauty. The towers rise like Art Deco cathedrals from the water. The cables sweep in perfect curves between the towers. The roadway extends in a graceful arc that seems to float above the churning strait. Your consciousness drifts along the length of the nearly finished bridge, marveling at how something so dangerous to build has resulted in something so beautiful to behold. The structure seems to capture the wild beauty of the Golden Gate itself, while taming it just enough to allow safe passage. The workers who have survived the construction process look upon their completed work with a mixture of pride and sorrow. They have accomplished something that many people thought impossible. They have created one of the most beautiful bridges ever built. But they have also paid a price in human life that makes their achievement bittersweet. Can you sense how great accomplishments often carry both triumph and tragedy within their stories? The Golden Gate Bridge stands as a monument to human ingenuity and determination, but it also represents the courage of workers who risked everything to build it, and the sacrifice of those who died in the attempt. As the construction phase of the bridge story draws to a close, your awareness becomes conscious of deeper currents beneath the visible narrative. The official story of the bridge's construction focuses on engineering achievements and construction milestones. But other stories remain hidden, stories of corruption, political manipulation, and secrets that the public never learned. As you witness both tragedy and triumph intertwined like the bridge's cables, you feel yourself drawn toward the hidden stories that most people never knew. Your spirit moves like gentle fog beneath the surface of the bridge story, where hidden struggles and secret disasters were quietly shaping the project's destiny. Away from the newspaper headlines and official reports, are different. Narrative unfolds, one filled with setbacks, failures, and human struggles that the public never saw. You drift through the quiet corners of the bridge project, where engineers work late into the night not on triumphant innovations, but on solving problems that threaten to derail everything they have accomplished. These are the stories that don't appear in official histories, the challenges that test human resilience in ways that heroic construction tales never capture. The first of these hidden struggles begins deep beneath the Golden Gate's waters, where soil testing reveals secrets that the bay has kept hidden for thousands of years. The engineers need to understand exactly what lies beneath the sea floor before they can build foundations strong enough to support the massive bridge towers. But the drilling equipment designed to extract soil samples from the bay floor proves inadequate for the Golden Gate's unique conditions. The powerful currents and rocky seafloor destroy drilling apparatus faster than it can be replaced. Expensive equipment worth more than most families' annual income simply disappears into the bay's depths, like offerings to an ancient sea god. Have you ever lost something valuable in deep water and felt that sinking sensation of knowing it's gone forever? The bridge project experiences this feeling repeatedly as drilling equipment worth $50,000, more than most people's houses at the time, vanishes into the Golden Gate's hungry waters with disturbing regularity. Each lost drill represents not just financial loss, but delays that push the project further behind schedule. The engineers must continuously redesign their drilling equipment, making it stronger and more resilient, only to watch the bay claim each new iteration with what seems like deliberate malice. The drilling disasters forced the project managers to revise their soil testing approach entirely. Instead of trying to force their equipment to work in the Golden Gate's conditions, they must develop entirely new methods that can survive the bay's relentless assault on anything humans try to place in its depths. Your consciousness drifts through the engineering offices where these drilling failures create mounting anxiety. Each day brings reports of more equipment losses, more delays, more costs that threaten the project's carefully planned budget. The soil beneath the bay remains largely mysterious, forcing engineers to design foundations based on incomplete information. But beneath the surface, something unexpected was happening that would eventually lead to breakthrough innovations in underwater construction. The repeated equipment failures force engineers to develop drilling technology so advanced and resilient that it will influence underwater construction projects for decades to come. The drilling struggles represent just one of many hidden technical disasters that plague the project. Wind tunnel testing, considered essential for understanding how the bridge will behave in the Golden Gate's notorious winds, produces results that nobody expected. Scale models of the bridge, carefully crafted to represent every detail of the planned structure, are placed in wind tunnels that simulate the Golden Gate's wind conditions. But instead of confirming the engineers' calculations, these tests reveal potentially catastrophic design flaws. The wind tunnel tests show that certain wind conditions could cause the bridge to oscillate in ways that might tear it apart. The scale models, representing months of careful construction work, are literally shaken to pieces by artificial winds that replicate what the real bridge will face every day. Can you imagine watching months of careful work destroyed in minutes by wind that reveals your design might not survive? The engineers observe their scale models vibrating, twisting, and eventually breaking apart as wind speeds increase to levels commonly experienced at the Golden Gate. These wind tunnel failures force complete redesigns of critical bridge components. The roadway must be restructured to handle wind loads that the original design cannot accommodate. The towers must be modified to resist oscillations that could propagate throughout the entire structure. Cable connections must be reinforced to handle forces that the initial calculations never anticipated. The drilling equipment worth more than most people's houses simply vanished into the Golden Gate's hungry waters, but the wind tunnel disasters cost something even more valuable: time and confidence in the fundamental design assumptions that underlie the entire project. Your gentle awareness moves through the community impacts that ripple outward from the bridge construction, like stones thrown into still water. While newspapers celebrate the bridge's progress, entire neighborhoods experience upheaval that receives little public attention. The construction of approach roads and support facilities requires the relocation of hundreds of families from communities that have existed for generations. These neighborhoods, home to fishing families, small business owners, and working-class immigrants, must be sacrificed for the bridge's infrastructure needs. Have you ever wondered what happens when an entire neighborhood disappears for a bridge? The residents receive official notices that their homes will be demolished, their businesses relocated, their communities scattered to make way for progress that may not benefit them directly. The relocation process unfolds with bureaucratic efficiency that ignores the human cost of displacement. Families who have lived in the same houses for decades must find new homes in an already crowded housing market. Small businesses that serve local communities must close or relocate to areas where they may not survive. Children who have attended the same schools and played in the same parks suddenly find their familiar world erased. Elderly residents who have spent their entire adult lives in these neighborhoods must adapt to new surroundings that feel foreign and unwelcoming. Your spirit drifts through these disrupted communities like a sympathetic witness to changes that transform lives in ways that official progress reports never acknowledge. The bridge represents triumph and achievement to some, but displacement and loss to others. But the community disruption extends beyond simple relocation. The bridge project creates housing shortages that affect thousands of workers and their families. The sudden influx of construction workers overwhelms the existing housing stock around the Golden Gate, creating an emergency that receives little official attention. Workers sleep in temporary camps, converted warehouses, and overcrowded boarding houses that would be considered substandard under normal circumstances. Families crowd into accommodations designed for single occupants. Children grow up in temporary housing that stretches into months and years as construction continues. The housing crisis affects not just the construction workers, but also the existing communities who find themselves competing for increasingly scarce and expensive housing. Rent prices rise as demand exceeds supply. Long-term residents are priced out of neighborhoods they have called home for decades. But beneath the surface of these housing struggles, something beautiful emerges that might warm your peaceful heart. The various communities, displaced residents, construction workers, and long-term neighbors begin to support each other in ways that create new bonds across traditional boundaries. Families share resources, childcare, and emotional support as they navigate the challenges of displacement and overcrowding. Churches and community organizations expand their services to help both relocated residents and newly arrived workers. The crisis brings out both the worst and the best in human nature, creating stories of both hardship and remarkable generosity. Your consciousness moves through another hidden aspect of the bridge story that reveals uncomfortable truths about the society of the 1930s. Despite the project's need for skilled workers and the high unemployment of the Depression era, racial segregation prevents many qualified minority workers from participating in the construction. Skilled African American iron workers, many with experience on major construction projects in other cities, find themselves excluded from bridge work by union rules and social customs that have nothing to do with their abilities. Similar barriers affect workers of Chinese, Mexican, and other minority backgrounds, despite the labor shortage that often delays construction activities. The segregation policies waste human talent at a time when the project desperately needs skilled workers. But more importantly, they deny economic opportunities to families who need work just as much as anyone else during these difficult economic times. Can you sense the tragedy of excluding capable people from meaningful work simply because of characteristics that have nothing to do with their ability to build bridges? The hidden discrimination represents a moral failure that contradicts the bridge's symbolic meaning as a structure that connects rather than divides. Some minority workers do find employment on the project, often in the most dangerous positions that other workers avoid. They face not only the physical hazards that challenge all bridge workers, but also social isolation and unequal treatment that add emotional burdens to already difficult working conditions. But despite these barriers, the minority workers who do participate in the bridge construction demonstrate the same courage, skill, and dedication as their colleagues. Their contributions, though less recognized at the time, become part of the bridge's legacy of human achievement over seemingly impossible challenges. Your spirit moves toward another category of hidden struggles that threaten the project's financial stability in ways that never appear in public financial reports. Insurance companies, tasked with providing coverage for the unprecedented risks of Golden Gate Bridge construction, begin refusing to honor their commitments as the true dangers become apparent. The insurance scandals unfold quietly in boardrooms and legal offices, away from public scrutiny. Companies that agree to provide coverage when the risks seem theoretical begin looking for ways to avoid paying claims when workers are injured or equipment is destroyed. Legal battles over insurance coverage consume time and money that should be devoted to construction. The Bridge District finds itself fighting not only the challenges of building an unprecedented structure, but also the companies that promise to share the financial risks of the endeavor. Some insurance companies simply declare bankruptcy rather than pay the claims they owe, leaving injured workers and their families without the financial support they were promised. Others engage in lengthy legal disputes that delay payments for months or years, creating additional hardships for people already struggling with construction-related injuries or deaths. The insurance problems force the Bridge District to become largely self-insured, setting aside reserves to cover risks that private companies refuse to handle. This additional financial burden threatens the project's viability and requires creative financing solutions that push the boundaries of municipal finance. But the insurance scandals also lead to innovations in construction risk management that influence major projects for decades to come. The Bridge District develops comprehensive safety and risk assessment procedures that become models for other large construction projects. Your consciousness drifts toward the supply chain disasters that create additional hidden struggles throughout the construction process. The specialized materials required for bridge construction must travel long distances to reach the Golden Gate, often by ship through waters that can be as dangerous as the construction site itself. Steel delivery disasters become almost routine as cargo ships carrying bridge materials encounter storms, mechanical failures, and navigation hazards. Entire shipments of specially manufactured steel components end up on the ocean floor, requiring remanufacturing and redelivery that add months to construction schedules. The steel that does arrive often suffers damage during transport that requires extensive repairs before it can be used. Saltwater corrosion, impact damage from rough seas, and handling accidents at ports create quality control nightmares that force engineers to inspect and often reject materials that took months to produce. But perhaps the most frustrating supply disasters involve concrete deliveries for the underwater construction work. The specialized concrete mixtures required for underwater pouring must be delivered precisely on schedule and used immediately. Any delay in delivery or problem with the mixing process can result in entire foundation sections that must be removed and rebuilt. Your gentle awareness observes the concrete pouring failures that require underwater rebuilds of foundation sections that took weeks to install originally. Divers must work in dangerous conditions to remove hardened concrete that didn't cure properly, then repeat the entire installation process with new materials and modified procedures. These concrete disasters happen beneath the water where they're invisible to the public, but they represent some of the most expensive and time-consuming setbacks in the entire project. Each failed pour costs thousands of dollars and weeks of schedule delays while also exposing workers to additional underwater dangers. Do you notice how some of the most significant challenges happen in places where they can't be seen? The underwater concrete failures, the soil testing disasters, the insurance scandals, all of these problems remain hidden from public view while consuming enormous amounts of time, money, and human energy. The cumulative effect of these hidden struggles creates a project atmosphere very different from the triumphant narrative that appears in newspapers and official reports. Behind the scenes, engineers and managers deal with a constant stream of setbacks, failures, and unexpected complications that test their resolve and resourcefulness. Your spirit moves through the project offices where managers work late into the night, not planning new achievements, but solving problems that threaten to derail everything they've accomplished. These quiet heroes of the bridge story demonstrate the kind of persistence and problem-solving ability that makes great projects possible despite seemingly insurmountable obstacles. The hidden struggles also reveal the human cost of ambitious projects in ways that heroic construction stories usually ignore. The displaced families, the excluded workers, the insurance fraud victims, the communities disrupted by construction. All of these people pay prices for progress that don't appear in official project budgets. But something remarkable emerges from these various hidden struggles that might bring you comfort in your dreamy state. The people affected by these problems, workers, families, communities, and project managers, develop resilience, creativity, and mutual support that represent the best aspects of human nature under pressure. The soil testing disasters lead to breakthrough innovations in underwater construction technology. The wind tunnel failures result in design improvements that make the bridge safer and more beautiful. The community disruption creates new forms of cooperation and mutual aid. The supply chain problems force the development of quality control procedures that influence construction projects worldwide. Can you sense how hidden struggles often produce unexpected benefits that compensate for their immediate costs? The Golden Gate Bridge becomes not just a triumph of engineering, but also a monument to human ability to overcome obstacles that seem insurmountable when they first appear. Your consciousness drifts through the final phases of these hidden struggles as the bridge nears completion. The various problems that once threatened to stop the project entirely have been solved, worked around, or absorbed into revised plans that accommodate reality rather than fighting it. The soil testing equipment that initially failed so catastrophically has evolved into technology sophisticated enough to map the bay floor with unprecedented accuracy. The wind tunnel testing that destroyed the first design iterations has produced a bridge structure capable of withstanding wind conditions that would destroy conventional designs. The communities disrupted by construction have adapted and in many cases become stronger than they were before. The workers excluded by discrimination have found other opportunities and in some cases forced changes in hiring practices that benefit future generations. The insurance problems have led to risk management innovations that protect workers and projects more effectively than traditional insurance approaches. As these hidden truths settle into the twilight of understanding, you feel yourself drawn toward even deeper secrets that powerful people tried to keep buried. Your consciousness moves like whispered secrets through the shadowy corridors where powerful men made deals that could build or destroy the bridge dream. In these quiet spaces behind closed doors, away from the construction sites and public ceremonies, a different kind of battle unfolds, one fought with money, influence, and carefully guarded information. The year is 1934, and your spirit drifts through smoke-filled rooms where politicians and business leaders gather to discuss matters that never appear in newspaper headlines. Here, the Golden Gate Bridge represents more than an engineering challenge or community improvement project. It has become a source of enormous financial opportunity for those who know how to manipulate the complex web of contracts, permits, and political favours. You float unseen through these clandestine meetings, observing how men in expensive suits negotiate deals that could determine whether the bridge project continues or dies quietly from lack of funding. The corruption unfolds with the genteel politeness of a formal dinner party, but beneath the civilized surface lie threats and promises that could reshape the entire project. The kickback scandals begin innocently enough, as most corruption does. A concrete supplier offers a small discount in exchange for preferred contractor status. A steel manufacturer provides free consulting services while hoping to win lucrative supply contracts. These seemingly harmless arrangements gradually evolve into a complex system of mutual favours that threatens the project's integrity. Can you imagine trying to build something magnificent while navigating a maze of people who want to profit from your dream? The bridge project becomes entangled in a web of political obligations and financial arrangements that have nothing to do with engineering excellence or public service. Your gentle awareness observes how these corruption schemes operate through layers of intermediaries and carefully worded contracts that hide their true purpose. Money changes hands through consulting fees, inflated supply costs, and phantom services that exist only on paper. The line between legitimate business and outright fraud becomes increasingly blurred as more participants join the system. But the corruption extends beyond simple financial kickbacks. Political influence peddling creates a shadow governance structure where decisions about bridge design, construction methods, and safety procedures are influenced by considerations that have nothing to do with engineering or public welfare. Local politicians demand that certain contractors receive preferential treatment in exchange for campaign contributions. State officials hint that regulatory approvals might be delayed unless particular suppliers are chosen for major components. Federal agencies suggest that permit processes could be expedited if the right consultants are hired for environmental assessments. The bridge project leaders find themselves caught between the need to complete their ambitious undertaking and the pressure to participate in a corruption system that could destroy public trust if exposed. They must navigate carefully between legitimate business practices and the ethical compromises that seem necessary to keep the project moving forward. But then something unexpected happened that threatened to expose the entire corruption network to public scrutiny. A disgruntled contractor who felt cheated out of expected profits began threatening to reveal the kickback schemes to newspaper reporters and government investigators. The threat of exposure creates panic among the politicians and business leaders who have profited from the bridge project's corruption. They must find ways to silence the potential whistleblower without creating additional evidence of wrongdoing. The solution they devise reveals the sophisticated nature of their corruption network. Instead of using obvious threats or bribes, they arrange for the troublesome contractor to receive a lucrative contract on a different project far from San Francisco. The arrangement satisfies his financial demands while removing him from the Golden Gate Bridge situation entirely. The potential scandal disappears as quietly as it emerged, leaving no trace in official records. Your consciousness drifts through the aftermath of this near exposure, observing how the corruption participants become more careful and sophisticated in their arrangements. They develop code words, use intermediaries, and structure their deals through multiple layers of legitimate appearing transactions. But the corruption scandals represent only one category of secrets that surround the bridge project. As construction progresses through the mid-1930s, the bridge begins attracting attention from unexpected sources. Foreign governments, and intelligence agencies who see the Golden Gate Bridge as more than a transportation improvement. International engineering espionage unfolds around the bridge project like a gentle spy story played out in slow motion. Engineers and technical observers from other countries arrive in San Francisco, ostensibly as tourists or academic visitors, but actually gathering intelligence about American construction techniques and engineering innovations. Can you imagine foreign spies watching American workers build a bridge, taking careful notes about construction methods that might be useful for military projects in their home countries? The bridge becomes an inadvertent showcase of American engineering capabilities that attract attention from nations around the world. Japanese observers show particular interest in the bridge's earthquake resistance features, taking detailed photographs and measurements that might help them design structures capable of surviving seismic activity. German engineers focus on the bridge's steel cable technology and wind resistance innovations that could influence their own construction projects. Soviet representatives, operating through academic and cultural exchange programs, gather information about the bridge's construction organization and labor management techniques. They seem especially interested in how American engineers coordinate large-scale projects involving thousands of workers and complex logistics. Your spirit moves through the social events and technical conferences where this espionage unfolds with the politeness of international diplomacy. Foreign visitors ask innocent-sounding questions about construction techniques, take photographs of technical details, and engage in conversations that gradually extract valuable information from American engineers who see no harm in discussing their professional achievements. The bridge project leaders gradually become aware of this international attention, but they face a delicate situation. The foreign interest represents a form of validation for their engineering innovations, but it also suggests that their work has strategic importance that extends far beyond local transportation needs. Some of the international observers operate openly as legitimate engineers and academics genuinely interested in learning from American construction innovations. But others work more secretively, gathering intelligence that might eventually be used for military purposes or competitive advantage in international construction projects. The espionage activities create an atmosphere of mild paranoia around the bridge project that affects everyone involved in the construction. Workers become suspicious of visitors who ask too many questions. Engineers become more careful about discussing technical details in public. Project managers begin restricting access to certain construction areas and technical documents. But then the war changed everything in ways no one expected, transforming the Golden Gate Bridge from a symbol of peaceful progress into a strategic military asset that required protection from enemy attack. When World War II begins in Europe and eventually draws America into the conflict, the Golden Gate Bridge suddenly acquires enormous military significance. The bridge provides the only direct land connection between San Francisco and the military installations north of the bay. Enemy forces that could destroy or damage the bridge might be able to isolate San Francisco and disrupt American military operations throughout the Pacific region. Your consciousness drifts through the bridge's transformation from civilian infrastructure to military fortress. The graceful structure that was designed to enhance peaceful commerce becomes bristling with defensive installations that change its entire character. Anti-aircraft guns appear on the bridge towers like metallic flowers blooming from steel stems. These weapons are positioned to defend against enemy aircraft that might attempt to bomb the bridge or use it as a navigation landmark for attacks on San Francisco's port facilities and military installations. The bridge that connected people during peacetime became a fortress during war, adorned with weapons and defensive systems that transformed its peaceful appearance into something more ominous and militaristic. Submarine nets are installed beneath the bridge to prevent enemy submarines from entering San Francisco Bay undetected. These massive underwater barriers require their own maintenance crews and surveillance systems that operate around the clock throughout the war. Years. Military checkpoints appear at both ends of the bridge, where armed guards inspect vehicles and question drivers about their destinations and purposes. The free movement of people and commerce that the bridge was designed to facilitate becomes subject to military security procedures that slow traffic and create an atmosphere of wartime tension. Your gentle awareness observes how the war years affect the bridge workers and surrounding communities. The construction crews who built the bridge find themselves working alongside military personnel who are responsible for protecting it. The neighborhoods that were disrupted by bridge construction now experience additional upheaval as military installations expand throughout the area. But the military transformation of the bridge also brings unexpected benefits to the local community. The increased military presence provides employment opportunities for civilians who work in support roles. The strategic importance of the bridge ensures that it receives priority for maintenance and improvements that might otherwise be delayed. The war years also reveal the bridge's importance to American morale and national identity. The Golden Gate Bridge appears in military recruitment posters, propaganda films, and patriotic publications as a symbol of American engineering achievement and determination to defend democratic values. Can you sense how a structure designed for peaceful purposes can become a symbol of national strength during times of conflict? The bridge's role evolves from facilitating local transportation to representing American resilience and technological superiority in the face of international threats. But even as the bridge serves these various wartime functions, it continues to face challenges that test its structural integrity and operational effectiveness. The additional weight of military equipment, the vibrations from anti-aircraft guns, and the modifications required for defensive installations create new engineering problems that must be solved while the war continues. The bridge's designers never anticipated that their structure would need to support heavy military equipment or withstand the stresses created by defensive weapons. Military engineers must work carefully to ensure that their modifications don't compromise the bridge's structural integrity or interfere with its primary transportation function. Your consciousness moves through the complex negotiations between military and civilian authorities about how to balance the bridge's defensive needs with its transportation responsibilities. Military commanders want maximum security measures that might interfere with civilian traffic. Bridge administrators want to maintain normal operations while accommodating reasonable security requirements. The compromises they reach create procedures and policies that influence how critical infrastructure is protected during national emergencies for decades to come. The Golden Gate Bridge becomes a testing ground for balancing security needs with civilian access in ways that preserve both military effectiveness and democratic values. But beneath these visible wartime changes, other secrets unfold that reveal the bridge's role in activities that remain classified for many years after the war ends. Intelligence agencies use the bridge's strategic location and symbolic importance for operations that have nothing to do with its transportation function. Coded radio transmissions originate from equipment hidden in the bridge's towers. Secret meetings take place in maintenance areas that are inaccessible to the public. Intelligence documents are exchanged during routine bridge inspections that serve as cover for espionage activities. These wartime secrets create a shadow history of the bridge that parallels its visible role as transportation infrastructure and military fortress. The bridge becomes part of intelligence networks that extend throughout the Pacific region and influence American strategy in ways that won't be revealed for decades. Your spirit drifts through the media propaganda wars that surround the bridge project throughout its construction and early operational years. Newspapers, radio programs, and newsreels present competing narratives about the bridge's value, safety, and significance that reflect deeper political and economic conflicts in American society. Some media outlets celebrate the bridge as a triumph of American engineering and democratic government's ability to undertake ambitious public works projects. They emphasize the bridge's beauty, technical innovation, and economic benefits while minimizing or ignoring its costs and controversies. Other publications focus on the bridge's problems, delays, and cost overruns as evidence of government waste and incompetence. They highlight worker deaths, construction setbacks, and financial scandals while questioning whether the bridge is really necessary or worth its enormous cost. The propaganda wars extend beyond simple pro- and anti-bridge positions to reflect broader ideological conflicts about the role of government in American society. Conservative critics see the bridge as an example of excessive government spending and interference with private enterprise. Progressive supporters view it as proof that democratic government can accomplish great things when properly organized and funded. Do you notice how the same facts can be interpreted in completely different ways depending on the observer's political perspective? The bridge becomes a kind of Rorschach test that reveals more about the observer's beliefs than about the bridge itself. Your consciousness moves through the union conflicts that erupt into violence during several strikes that shut down bridge construction for weeks at a time. These labor disputes go far beyond simple disagreements about wages and working conditions to reflect fundamental conflicts about workers' rights and corporate power in American society. The strikes create dangerous situations where picket lines, strike breakers, and police forces confront each other in ways that sometimes result in injuries and arrests. The bridge construction sites become battlegrounds where broader social conflicts play out through immediate disputes about specific working conditions and union recognition. But the union violence also leads to innovations in labor relations that influence construction projects throughout the country. The bridge project becomes a testing ground for new approaches to collective bargaining, worker safety, and dispute resolution that help establish standards for large-scale construction projects. The strikes force both management and labor leaders to develop more sophisticated negotiation techniques and conflict resolution procedures. They learn to separate immediate workplace issues from broader political and economic disputes that cannot be resolved through local bargaining. Your gentle awareness observes the Coast Guard rescue attempts that unfold whenever workers fall from the bridge or equipment failures create emergency situations. These rescue operations reveal both the heroism of emergency responders and the limitations of 1930s rescue technology when confronted with the Golden Gate's challenging conditions. Coast Guard boats race through dangerous currents and high winds to reach workers who have fallen into the cold water. The rescue crews demonstrate remarkable courage and skill as they navigate conditions that challenge even experienced sailors while attempting to save lives in situations where every second matters. But the rescue attempts also reveal how inadequate existing emergency procedures are for the unique challenges of Golden Gate Bridge construction. The Coast Guard must develop new rescue techniques, equipment, and coordination procedures specifically for bridge-related emergencies. The near-miss incidents that almost killed dozens more workers create a parallel narrative of disasters that were narrowly avoided through luck, quick thinking, or last-minute equipment changes. These incidents never become public knowledge because no one dies or suffers serious injury, but they reveal how close the bridge construction comes to experiencing far more tragic losses. Cable snaps that miss workers by inches, scaffolding collapses that occur just after work crews move to different locations, equipment failures that could have killed dozens but happen during shift changes when fewer people are present. These near misses accumulate throughout the construction process like a series of warnings about the dangers that surround every aspect of the project. Your consciousness drifts through the final phases of these various secret dramas as the bridge completes its transformation from construction project to operational infrastructure. The corruption scandals fade as the profits are distributed and the participants move on to other projects. the espionage activities diminish as foreign observers gather the information they need and return to their home countries. The wartime militarization gradually gives way to peaceful civilian use as the war ends and security concerns shift to other priorities. The media propaganda wars evolve into more measured assessments of the bridge's actual performance and value. The union conflicts resolve into stable labour relations that provide models for other construction projects. Can you sense how time transforms dramatic conflicts into historical curiosities that seem less important with each passing year? The secrets and struggles that once seemed crucial to the bridge's survival become footnotes in a larger story of human achievement and adaptation. The bridge that emerged from these various hidden battles is stronger and more resilient than it would have been without them. The corruption forced more rigorous oversight procedures. The espionage led to better security measures. The wartime experience proved the bridge's strategic value. The media wars established its cultural significance. The union conflicts improved worker protections. As these secrets of survival and struggle fade into history, you feel yourself floating forward toward our modern world, where the bridge faces entirely new challenges. Your spirit emerges gently into our modern world, where the Golden Gate Bridge stands like a wise elder who has survived wars, earthquakes, and decades of Pacific storms. The year is now, and you float peacefully above the bridge that has become more than its builders ever imagined. A symbol recognized around the world, a testament to human dreams transformed into enduring reality. You drift slowly through the morning mist that still caresses the bridge's towers, just as it did on that first day in 1937 when cars began crossing the span. The fog moves like gentle fingers across the international orange cables. The same colour chosen all those years ago to help ships navigate safely through these waters while making the bridge visible through San Francisco's eternal mist. Time has transformed the bridge from an ambitious engineering project into something almost alive, a structure that breathes with temperature changes, sways slightly in Pacific winds, and carries the stories of millions of people who have crossed its span during more than 8 decades of faithful service. The bridge has outlived most of its original builders, watched children become grandparents, and served as silent witness to the endless parade of human hopes and dreams that flow across its roadway every single day. What do you think it feels like to be a bridge that has outlived its builders, watching generations pass beneath your towers like waves beneath a ship? Your consciousness moves slowly through the bridge's modern challenges, beginning with the great earthquake that tested everything the original engineers believed about their design. On October 17th, 1989, the earth beneath the bridge shook with a violence that collapsed sections of other Bay Area bridges and damaged buildings throughout Northern California. The Loma Prieta earthquake sent seismic waves through the ground like ripples through water, and when those waves reached the Golden Gate Bridge, something beautiful happened that would have made Joseph Strauss smile in his eternal rest. The bridge swayed and flexed exactly as its designers had hoped, bending with the Earth's movement instead of fighting it. You observe the gentle dance the bridge performed during those terrifying moments, moving like a tree in wind rather than breaking like a rigid stick. The flexible design that had been so carefully calculated in the 1930s proved its worth as the bridge absorbed the earthquake's energy and distributed it safely through its steel framework. The earthquake revealed something wonderful and something worrying in equal measure. The bridge had survived magnificently, but the seismic testing that followed discovered new information about the San Andreas fault that ran uncomfortably close to the bridge's foundations. Modern earthquake science revealed threats that the original engineers could never have imagined. But the bridge had one more surprise waiting in the discoveries that emerged from post-earthquake analysis. Engineers found that while the bridge had performed beautifully during the 1989 earthquake, an even larger seismic event, the kind that geological studies suggested might occur every few centuries, could potentially challenge the structure in ways that 1930s engineering had never anticipated. This discovery led to one of the most expensive renovation projects in bridge history, a $2 billion seismic retrofitting program that would strengthen the bridge's ability to survive earthquakes that dwarf anything previously experienced in recorded California history. The renovation became almost like rebuilding the bridge while keeping it open to traffic every day. Can you imagine performing surgery on a patient who must continue working throughout the operation? The seismic retrofitting required exactly that kind of careful balance between necessary improvements and continued service to the millions of people who depend on the bridge for their daily commutes. Your spirit drifts through the years of renovation work, observing how modern engineers paid tribute to their predecessors while adapting the bridge for challenges that extend far into the future. They strengthened foundations, reinforced connections, and added flexibility systems that work like the bridge's original design, but accommodate seismic forces beyond anything the 1930s engineers could have calculated. The renovation revealed another charming aspect of the bridge's character that might make you smile in your peaceful state. The bridge now costs more to paint every 7 years than it originally cost to build, a testament to both inflation and the enormous care required to maintain such an iconic structure. The painting process never truly ends, like caring for a beloved family member who requires constant attention. Teams of painters work year-round, removing old paint damaged by salt spray and Pacific storms, then applying new coats of international orange that keep the bridge beautiful and protected from the corrosive ocean environment. The painting crews become almost like guardian angels of the bridge, working in all weather conditions to maintain the structure that has become a symbol not just of San Francisco, but of American engineering achievement. They rappel down cables, work from suspended platforms, and apply protective coatings with the same dedication that the original construction workers showed during the dangerous building years. Your consciousness moves gently through another modern challenge that weighs heavily on the bridge's caretakers and the surrounding community. The same beauty and symbolic power that make the Golden Gate Bridge an international icon have also attracted people seeking to end their lives by jumping from the span into the cold Pacific waters below. More than 1,700 people have chosen the bridge as their final destination since it opened, creating a tragic shadow that accompanies the structure's magnificent beauty. The bridge that was built to connect and inspire has also become associated with final desperation in ways that its builders never anticipated. But something hopeful emerged from this heartbreaking pattern as the community rallied to address the crisis with the same determination that originally built the bridge. Suicide prevention programs, crisis counselors, and eventually physical barriers were installed to intercept people in their darkest moments and offer them alternatives to permanent solutions for temporary problems. The suicide prevention barriers, installed after decades of community debate and careful design work, represent a victory of compassion over despair. They transform the bridge from a destination for ending life into a place where life can be preserved and hope can be restored. The barriers blend seamlessly with the bridge's original design, while serving as silent guardians that have already saved many lives. Your gentle awareness observes how these prevention measures work, not through force or imprisonment, but through creating time, precious seconds and minutes during which people in crisis can reconsider their decisions, accept help from trained counselors, or simply pause long enough for the immediate intensity of their despair to diminish. The traffic flowing across the bridge has increased from 11,000 vehicles per day in 1937 to more than 120,000 vehicles daily in our modern era. The bridge that once seemed almost empty during its early years now carries a constant stream of cars, trucks, and buses that would amaze its original builders. This dramatic increase in traffic creates challenges that go beyond simple capacity. The bridge must be constantly monitored for structural stress, maintained to handle loads far beyond its original design specifications, and managed to ensure safety for the enormous number of people who depend on it every day. Can you imagine the responsibility of caring for a structure that serves so many people every single day? The bridge engineers and maintenance crews carry the weight of knowing that millions of people trust their work to keep the bridge safe and functional for journeys both routine and extraordinary. Your spirit moves through the post-September 11th security measures that transform the bridge from an open symbol of freedom into a carefully protected piece of critical infrastructure. Electronic monitoring systems, security cameras, and patrol procedures now guard against threats that would have been unimaginable to the bridge's original designers. The security measures create a delicate balance between protection and accessibility. The bridge must remain open to the public while defending against potential terrorist attacks that could target it as a symbol of American achievement or attempt to disrupt transportation throughout the Bay Area. But the security systems also serve peaceful purposes, monitoring the bridge's structural health, tracking traffic patterns, and providing rapid response capabilities for accidents or emergencies that require immediate attention. The same technology that protects against threats also helps ensure that the bridge continues serving its primary mission of safe and efficient transportation. Your consciousness drifts toward the climate change challenges that represent perhaps the most significant long-term threat to the bridge's continued operation. Rising sea levels, increasingly powerful storms, and changing weather patterns create new stresses that must be anticipated and addressed through careful planning and adaptive engineering. The Pacific Ocean is gradually rising, creating the possibility that extreme high tides combined with severe storms might someday threaten the bridge's foundations in ways that even the most careful original planning never anticipated. The bridge that has survived earthquakes and wars now faces the challenge of adapting to a slowly changing climate. But the bridge's engineers approach climate change with the same innovative spirit that originally made the structure possible. They develop monitoring systems that track environmental changes, design adaptation strategies that can be implemented as conditions evolve, and plan modifications that will help the bridge survive whatever challenges the future climate might bring. The increased frequency and intensity of Pacific storms also test the bridge's ability to remain open during severe weather conditions. Wind speeds that once rarely affected bridge operations now occur more frequently, requiring more sophisticated weather monitoring and more frequent temporary closures to ensure public safety. Your gentle awareness observes how the bridge has become a kind of weather station that provides early warning about Pacific storm systems approaching the California coast. Its sensors and monitoring equipment contribute to regional weather prediction systems that help protect communities throughout Northern California. But beyond all these practical challenges and adaptations, the bridge continues to serve its most important function, connecting what nature separated and making possible journeys that would otherwise require much longer and more difficult routes around the bay. Every day, the bridge carries people to work, school, medical appointments, and family visits that define the rhythm of modern life in the Bay Area. It enables commerce, facilitates tourism, and provides the transportation infrastructure that supports the economic and social life of millions of people. The bridge has watched children grow up making regular trips across its span, seen families reunited after long separations, and facilitated countless first dates, job interviews, and life-changing conversations that occurred during the brief journey between San Francisco and Marin County. What stories do you think the bridge could tell about all the human dramas that have unfolded during crossings of its span? The proposals of marriage, the business deals negotiated by phone, the tourists experiencing their first glimpse of San Francisco Bay, the daily commuters who have crossed so many times that the journey has become as natural as breathing. Your spirit moves slowly through the bridge's role as a backdrop for celebrations, protests, and historic events that have shaped the region's identity over more than 8 decades. The bridge has been featured in countless movies, photographed by millions of visitors, and served as a symbol of hope and achievement that transcends its practical transportation function. The bridge appears on postcards sent around the world, in paintings and photographs that hang in homes far from California, and in the memories of travelers who carry images of its beauty back to distant places. It has become a global ambassador for San Francisco and a symbol of what humans can accomplish when they combine ambition with careful planning and persistent effort. But perhaps most remarkably, the bridge continues to inspire new dreams and ambitious projects around the world. Engineers studying the Golden Gate Bridge's design and construction methods have applied its innovations to bridges, tunnels, and other infrastructure projects on every continent. The bridge that began as an impossible dream has become a teacher and inspiration for new generations of engineers who face their own seemingly impossible challenges. Its legacy lives not just in its continued operation, but in the influence it has had on how humans approach large-scale projects that require innovation, persistence, and faith in the possibility of success. Your consciousness drifts slowly toward the eternal aspects of the bridge's story that transcend its practical functions and historical significance. The bridge has become more than infrastructure. It has become a work of art that changes appearance with the light, weather, and seasons in ways that continue to surprise and delight observers after more than 8 decades. The fog that still caresses the bridge's towers each morning connects the present moment to that first day when cars began crossing the completed span. The Pacific winds that test the bridge's strength remind us of the natural forces that the structure has learned to dance with rather than fight against. The bridge stands as proof that impossible dreams can become permanent reality when humans combine vision with careful planning, innovation with respect for natural forces, and individual ambition with collective effort. It demonstrates that engineering can be both functional and beautiful, that progress can honor rather than destroy natural beauty. Can you feel how the bridge's story connects to your own dreams and aspirations? The same qualities that made the Golden Gate Bridge possible, imagination, persistence, careful planning, and faith in the possibility of success, apply to any ambitious goal that seems impossible until someone proves otherwise. The bridge that connects San Francisco to Marin County also connects past to future, dreams to reality, and individual vision to collective achievement. It stands as a permanent reminder that humans can create beautiful, lasting solutions to challenges that initially seem insurmountable. Your spirit settles into the peaceful rhythm of the bridge's eternal watch over the Golden Gate, where it continues serving millions of people while maintaining its role as a symbol of what becomes possible when dreams meet determination, careful planning encounters, innovative engineering, and human ambition works in harmony with natural beauty. The bridge that began in the minds of visionary engineers has become a permanent part of the landscape, as natural seeming as the hills it connects and as enduring as the Pacific tides that flow beneath its span. It has survived its builders, served multiple generations, and adapted to challenges that could never have been anticipated when ground was first broken for its foundations. The morning light that illuminates the bridge's international orange towers each day also illuminates the continuing possibility that humans can conceive and build solutions to problems that seem impossible, create beauty that enhances rather than diminishes natural wonders, and leave legacies that serve and inspire long after their creators have passed from memory into history. The bridge stands in peaceful permanence above the waters that once seemed impossible to span, a testament to the power of dreams transformed through patient effort into lasting reality. It whispers across the decades that no challenge is too great, no vision too ambitious, when approached with the right combination of imagination, engineering, and unwavering commitment to making the impossible beautifully, permanently real. Your consciousness drifts slowly into the settling peace of the bridge's completed story, where every challenge faced has been overcome, every problem solved has led to greater wisdom, and every dream pursued has become part of the permanent legacy that stretches gracefully across the Golden Gate like a promise kept, a vision fulfilled, a testament to the enduring power of human hope and determination. Let sleep carry you gently now, cradled by the bridge's eternal watch over the Golden Gate, into the most peaceful rest where dreams of impossible things